Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking something incredibly intense: trauma bonding and what's known as the dancing chicken reflex. I know, weird name, but it explains a dynamic that can literally hijack your entire life. We're talking about the trap of toxic hot and cold relationships. If you've ever found yourself hopelessly stuck in a situation that violently swings between intense highs and devastating lows, you know exactly how heavy this topic is. My goal today is to break down the actual mechanics of this emotional snare so we can truly understand what's happening beneath the surface, and way more importantly, how you can finally reclaim your peace.
Okay, let's dive right into this. If you clicked on this explainer, there's a really good chance you know this internal reality all too well. You were treated poorly, you feel completely obsessed, you feel deeply sad, and yet you stay. You might even feel like you're just too messed up to get out. Your friends see it, they beg you to leave, and logically, you know they're 100% right. But internally, leaving feels entirely impossible. So, why on earth do we stay when the situation is actively hurting us? To answer that, we really have to look at the clinical definition of what is actually happening to your brain. A trauma bond is built on a dynamic called intermittent reinforcement. Basically, this is where someone showers you with intense affection and approval, but then suddenly, boom, they flip the script. They alternate that love with severe neglect, disapproval, abandonment, or even outright abuse. Logically, this emotional on and off torture should be a giant red flag, right? It should send you running for the hills. But for someone who experienced trauma or neglect in childhood, this hot and cold behavior has an incredibly insidious power. It essentially acts as a mental hook that grabs onto your mind and just doesn't let go. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive deception at the core of all this. There is a stark contrast between true connection and what you're actually experiencing in a trauma bond. On one hand, we have true connection, which, by the way, is exactly what you are biologically designed to thrive in. It's marked by consistent safety, acceptance, and support. But on the flip side, we see the trauma bond totally masquerading as genuine love. Instead of safety, you get hot and cold obsession. Instead of support, you are literally surviving on emotional crumbs and high drama. It's a wild roller coaster that mimics passion, but honestly, it's just turbulence. Now, here is a crucial piece of information that should really help destigmatize what you might be going through. This intense attachment you feel, it's not because you are weak. Actually, it's an involuntary reflex. Think about it like this. In warfare, this exact same kind of psychological manipulation is used on prisoners of war to break them down and make them loyal to their captors. It works because it trips a wire deep within human biology. It plays on wiring from infancy, a literal survival tactic, where a tiny child will do whatever it takes to stay connected to a parent, even an abusive one, just to stay protected. In adulthood, clinging to a destructive relationship is just a maladaptation of that exact same childhood survival reflex. To truly wrap our heads around this involuntary reflex, there is a fascinating and honestly kind of heartbreaking story from our source material. When the author was just 6 years old, she visited this little roadside attraction. For a dime and a slot, you could watch these chickens dance inside wire cages. A machine would play this tinny little music, and the chickens would just jump around to the beat. For exactly 5 seconds, that 6-year-old child was totally, completely charmed by the spectacle. It looked like fun entertainment. It looked like the chickens were performing this joyful, happy routine. But as you can probably guess, that illusion shuttered very, very quickly. She asked her brother how they trained the chickens to dance like that, and he dropped the horrifying truth. It was an electric shock. The current literally ran through the wires of the cage. The child had put the dime in, started the shock, and couldn't figure out how to make it stop. This is absolutely the perfect analogy for a trauma bond. The dance between two people in this dynamic isn't some joyful, passionate connection. It is an involuntary, traumatic response to an electric shock. You aren't dancing, you are just jumping around in the cage, reacting to the pain. Now, let's break down the psychological loop that keeps you trapped in that cage. Phase 1 is the threat or abandonment. Internally, this creates pure, unadulterated dread and panic. This leads directly into phase 2, the obsession, where you feel an absolute burning compulsion to figure out the exact right words or behaviors to just fix it. Then comes phase 3, the reunion. When you are finally allowed back into the good graces of the person who abandoned you, there is this huge, intense rush of relief. It feels like the greatest love story of all time. But it's not. It's really just a drug-like addiction to the relief of the pain stopping. which sadly leads right into phase 4, the aftermath, leaving you in a state of empty exhaustion until the whole crazy cycle starts all over again.
So, where does this mental loop even come from? Well, it starts as a groove in your psyche, and it's almost always formed in childhood. Imagine a child with an alcoholic or addicted parent. That child has a deep biological need for that parent's care. Sometimes they actually receive these intense moments of love. But then come the sudden shifts. The parent is suddenly out of it, rageful, or just entirely absent. Then they sober up and are intensely, tearfully sorry. The child learns a really tragic survival strategy from this. Hang on to every tiny sign of love and learn to survive on the absolute crumbs of affection.
Let's move along and see how this groove manifests when you grow up. Because that childhood survival tactic, it doesn't just magically disappear. It manifests as a crazy high tolerance for bad treatment from romantic partners. It shows up as a magnetic, almost gravitational attraction to emotionally unavailable people, love addiction, and a terrifying inability to leave abusive partners. You end up with this deeply ingrained compulsion to just keep trying, believing that if you can only find the right words, you can switch their love back on for good. But as we know, it never actually works out like that. You know, it is so incredibly vital to recognize the reality of that crazy intense pleasure you feel during the reunion phase of a trauma bond. It feels epic, right? But it is not actually love. As our source puts it perfectly, it's a bug in the system. It's not a feature. It is simply one of your conditioned responses that makes you hold on for dear life when you feel threatened with rejection. It's not some grand, sweeping romance. It's an involuntary response to a yucky stimulus, just like the chicken reacting to the shock. I really want this truth to sink in for a second. If you get hooked in a trauma bond with someone who is blowing hot and cold, it was involuntary, and it is absolutely not your fault. You have got to let go of the shame and the self-attack you've been carrying around. Because the longer you spend attacking yourself, the longer you stay stuck, living on those emotional crumbs. You don't want to get good at handling lousy treatment. You want to be really, really bad at it. So, the crucial point is, how do we actually break this loop? Assuming you aren't literally held captive, you're the only one who can change your side of the dynamic. Step 1. Address the void in your life by going out and making real friends. Step 2. If you want to stay and try to find peace, you have to draw a hard line against dramatic threats. Stop threatening the relationship just to get that weird high of a reunion. Step 3. Without all that intense drama, things might feel a bit empty at first, so fill that emptiness with genuine, quiet communication. And Step 4. If you realize you are actually not loved, or if any abuse is present, use your support system to make a quiet, intentional, totally drama-free exit. This shift toward community is exactly why Step 1 is such a massive game changer. Having genuine friendships completely reduces the immense pressure on your romantic relationship. It means your partner doesn't have to be your entire universe. When you have friends you can be truly honest with, you won't always feel so desperately alone. Practicing that kind of safe connection makes building a peaceful life entirely doable. Plus, it makes leaving a toxic situation physically and emotionally possible, rather than feeling like the end of the world. Because at the end of the day, this is the choice right in front of you. You can absolutely stay in the old loop, living on emotional crumbs, constantly reactivating your deepest trauma wounds, and mistaking pure, exhausting adrenaline for love. Or you can choose the peaceful path, strengthening a genuine bond without relying on giant spikes of endorphins to make it feel real. It requires quiet intentionality, it requires safety. But remember, you were meant to be loved. You are biologically designed to thrive when you are safe, accepted, and supported. Healing is absolutely possible, for sure. You have a whole life ahead of you where you can be safe and genuinely loved, completely free from the electric shocks. You just have to be willing to change your patterns and do a little bit of the hard work. So, looking back at the harsh reality of the trauma bond, are you ready to step out of that cage, stop dancing to the tinny music, and finally find your peace?